Hello, welcome back to second installment of Chapter 8 Learning Lecture. Apologize, don't have the picture of me. I know that's just terribly sad for some of you. But my son wanted to use the laptop today, and so I had to let him to use it, so I've got to make adjustments. So I'm just using the speaker today. All right, now we're moving on to classical conditioning and humans. And here we have the famous experiment by John B. Watson, classical conditioning, on baby Albert. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you here that I have. It's online if you're really interested in the details of the baby Albert experiment. But I'll probably be showing you a little film on it in class, a video. But basically, little Albert was a 9-month-old infant. And to make a long story short, Watson was able to actually classically condition phobias into him, starting with basically, I think it was a rat. And every time he showed him the rat and the rat would get near him, he'd clang a very loud noise behind little Albert, a pipe and a hammer, and it would startle Albert and he would cry. And they found that out first, that he would do that, and that he had no fear of the rat in itself. And then what happened was every time the rat was exposed to little Albert, they'd hit the bar again, and it didn't take very long before little Albert to just see the rat and start crying because he knew it was about to come. Okay, and so they were able to find out that they could generalize that behavior towards rabbits, white rabbits, masks of rabbits, just a lot of different stuff that baby Albert became very, very afraid of, or little Albert. And basically they were able to condition a phobia into him. So that's the story of that. So it does work on human beings very well. We also can learn taste aversions through the same methodology. Unfortunately, these pictures were actually in motion, but the way I'm doing this, they won't work right now. So everybody was kind of puking on these. You know, my sense of humor. When it comes to food being paired with sickness, the conditioning is incredibly strong. So if we eat something and then a little while later we get sick, we start to have a problem with that food. I know my brother, for instance, I don't know what happened when we were younger, but he hated mayonnaise. And to this day, he still won't eat mayonnaise because when he was younger, I don't know if it spoiled in his lunch at school or if it was outside. I don't know exactly what happened, but he ate a sandwich at lunch that had mayonnaise on it that my mom had made, and he got ill, violently ill. And he always claimed it was the mayonnaise, and who knows what it was. It could have been something else. But that pairing of the mayonnaise and his sickness, just he had a taste aversion for mayonnaise. He would never eat it. Okay, and it can even happen when food and sickness are hours apart. It doesn't always have to happen one right after the other. Okay, now the food must be salient, meaning noticeable. You can't you can't be faked into it or something like that, or if you're unaware, I don't know. I guess an example of that would be, sometimes we have a tendency to snack and we don't even realize we ate something, maybe some nuts or something somewhere, in a restaurant or something. If you forget about that, you may not make that connection. So there's that. All right, Garcia and Colling's study. What they did is they took rats. This rat's supposed to be dancing, but it's not. And they wanted to see how they make associations. So some associations seem to be adaptive. And so here's a little chart. What they found was the conditioned stimulus, like loud noise, and then the unconditioned stimulus was shock. They learned fear of the loud noise. That makes sense. Loud noise, I'm going to get shocked. Then they did it with radiation, loud noise and radiation, which of course we don't always know that's happening to us, do we? Loud noise, and what they found was nothing. They couldn't pair the two stimuluses together to come up with a response. Same with sweet water and shock. That didn't seem to have an effect either, even though water is technically a food, and they knew they were taking it. Now, then they had sweet water and radiation. They did start to figure out to avoid water that made them sick. Okay, and this is a very adaptive thing. It's one of those things. Why can't you just poison rats out of an area? Rats, overwhelm areas where they can reproduce, and you got to call in literally like an exterminator. Rats are very smart, and they learn from each other. And so when they see something going on with one rat getting sick from water or some other food source, the other rats will stay away from it. And so that's one reason why getting rid of rats is so difficult. They also reproduce very, very quickly. But anyway, that's what we got from that study. Now, there are two contradicting facts that come from this. Rats learn to avoid food that made them ill, even if the illness happens hours after eating it. So that seems a little odd. But rats dislike the taste that made them ill, but not the sight of the food. So interesting. It's not. They'll go investigate it. They'll go check it out. But they'll taste it again. If they taste it again and know, hey, I've eaten this and gotten sick, that's when they'll stop. Okay, but they won't just completely avoid the sight of the food, which probably human beings are more likely to do. So Pavlov's classical conditioning has led to a variety of practical uses, like helping drug addicts, increasing immune system efficiency, and treating emotional disorders. So it has practical application here. And of course, I'm sure you've seen things like, well, I was going to say training your dog, but that's more operant. So we'll go with that. Which brings me to operant conditioning. So here you have, unlike classical conditioning, the learner is not passive. Learning is based on consequence. Okay, and in this picture, the dog, the little girl is, or lady or whatever she is feeding the dog after it sits, but that's not happening here. Whereas classical conditioning depends on developing association between events, operant conditioning involves learning from the consequences of our behavior. So we learn, touching. We take an iron, when we're little, I always use this example because if you touch a hot iron, you learn pretty quickly. Don't check out what's going on with an iron by using the tip of your finger. It can be very hot and very painful. Most of us learn that. All right, started off with this law of effect. Okay, and this was Edward Thorndike who's there in the picture. And what he did is he locked cats in a cage, and there's the cage underneath his picture that he used. And what he was trying to do is see how effective were they at getting out of the cage. And what he would use is he would like a plate of fish or something, stuff like that cats like, cut up outside the cage, which the cat would want. And so what he was trying to figure out is, were the cats learning to get out of the cage, or was it an accident when they would get out? They would test different things. They'd try to slip through the bars or squeeze through open slots or something like that, and it wouldn't work. But then they would eventually move a cord there that would open the door and they could get out. And he thought perhaps they were doing it on accident. Like you keep moving around enough and something happens and you just walk through the open door. What he found was when he would take the cats back after they would get their reward and eat, and he put them back into the cage, they were getting out of the cage faster and faster each time, which indicates, according to him, that they're learning. Okay? So the reward was strengthening the behavior. Each time they got put in a cage and got out, they got more food. If consequences are unpleasant, the stimulus-reward connection will weaken. Okay, so that's an important thing to understand. So if every time they went to get out of the cage, they received an electric shock when they stepped out of the cage, they probably wouldn't try so hard to get out of the cage. He called the whole process instrumental learning. All right, now we're moving on to B.F. Skinner, the Mac Daddy of operant conditioning. I love talking about this guy. He cracks me up. We'll probably watch some videos of him. And he is a Harvard professor. It's like he's so smart. When he talks, I feel like he's struggling to find words that he could use to help us mere mortals. He's a very smart man, brilliant. And I always thought his head was kind of shaped like an alien. I always thought maybe he's not really from this planet, but that's a different story for another time. But there he is, a brilliant man. He is a nurture guy through and through. He used what became known as a Skinner box, originally called an operant conditioning chamber, okay, to prove his concept. I don't think he named it Skinner box himself. It's other people named it after him. He elaborated on Thorndike's law of effect and developed behavioral technology to show how to get it done. And I'm going to use this next slide to explain it. The chamber is basically usually as a bar or a key that an animal manipulates to obtain food or water as a reinforcer. It contains devices to record the number of responses. So as you can see, I'll give you a couple examples here of the birds. The birds peck at little dots. And then this one is just they used a kid operant a Skinner box. But the one that's really the most famous is the rat one, where this rat has to, when the light lights up, they have to press the bar here so many times. They keep retraining the rat to get food, which is over here, to be released down a chute so they can get food. And sometimes it was as simple as one push. Of course, that's real easy to train a rat. But sometimes it was, they'd work their way up to 20 pushes. Could a rat actually remember, I got to push this bar 20 times to get food? Okay, so they were just wondering what different ways that they could operantly train these rats. And basically it's the same thing with the birds. Pigeons are pretty smart birds. They would just do it with pecking at a little disc that would register how many times they had hit it. So pretty cool stuff here. Next video I'm going to go to is talking about how do we actually use an operant chamber today. Other than that, have a nice day.